Let's bring in Dave Thomas, voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders here. And I would love to know, Dave, in the past 6 days, how many people have approached you and said, "Hey, Dave, what happened against Montreal? Like, what went wrong?" Yeah, Dave, what happened against Montreal? What went wrong, in your opinion?
Well, it's an interesting thought in the fact that nobody really is asking what went wrong, because you know what? It was a 3-phase, and I don't want to say collapse. That sounds really drastic and dramatic, but all 3 phases struggled at various times, and you couldn't get a connected football game out of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and that's what happened. The bigger question that I've had this last week is, how concerned should I be?
Ooh,
that's the more difficult one. Yeah.
I've had some time to think. We're still 10-3. I'm back to feeling a little too good about ourselves. It takes now, I'll preface this. Montreal needs to go in tonight and put on an absolute clinic against Toronto. And I know it's Toronto and all of that, but they have to win, because last week can't be a fluke. If the Alouettes turn into, well, they've won 1 of their last 7 games, and that 1 game was against the Riders, that will make me feel incredibly bad as a Rider fan.
You can't base it on those results, because you're just going to get yourself wound up into a tizzy if, well, they did this against them, and then against us they did this, and then we did. That's just a hole that you're going to fall down, and it's really, 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 really tough to recover from that. What I would suggest is that the sky isn't falling. There is definitely some disappointment as to what's happened in that football game, and it's been allowed to linger for a week during the bye week for the Roughriders, but I've got faith. Again, why wouldn't you? This team has already got 10 victories. They were really, really banged up in that game against the Montreal Alouettes, so again, it's not full panic time, and I don't think we have to see what happens in Montreal to feel better about that. The Alouettes, the one thing that they have done, and the Calgary Stampeders have done to the Saskatchewan Roughriders that no one else has done thus far, in my estimation, when putting their offense on the field, they have gone ahead and remained two-dimensional. The Rough Rider defense, for the most part this season, right, has made their opponents one-dimensional. Best run defense in the league going into last week, and then Stevie Scott comes out of nowhere and has a great game.
Yeah.
Why does he have such a great game? Well, because Montreal committed to running the football. We're going to continue to run the football. Even if we don't go ahead and get 10, 12, 14-yard runs, we're going to stay with it. And a lot of teams haven't done so. If you look at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, for example, in the Labor Day Classic, when you've got the reigning most outstanding player carrying the ball, touching the ball less than 10 times. So you got to tip your hat to the Montreal Alouettes. We'll see what happens in Toronto, because I think it is going to be a heck of a fight at a tough place to play, whether you believe it or not.
It's very easy to say, well, they ran on us. These guys didn't. So when the Stampeders and the Alouettes last week were able to run on the Riders, what are they doing, or what were they able to expose that the Bombers and every other team can't? Like, when you're up there, what do you see to say to the common fan, well, this is why they're able to do it, outside of, well, they just kept trying?
You know, my untrained eye was this a physical thing, right? Are the Rough Riders being physically beaten? And what Luke pointed out to me was that the team seemed to be out of phase. And I think what Luke was kind of mentioning when we were talking about this off the air is that players were trying to do other players' jobs, if you know what I mean. So all of a sudden, oh my gosh, Montreal's starting to run the ball, so I'm going to have to go ahead and I'm going to have to cheat up a little bit, right? So in doing so, that's going to give the other team opportunities to make plays. But conversely, oh my gosh, they're starting to beat us deep. Well, everybody drops back into the deeper zone, then you throw the ball underneath, or you've got fewer players in the box. And that was kind of what I think Luke was alluding to when we were talking about it. And to me, it makes a lot of sense that, again, he consistently talks about the fact that if you play at a 7 out of 10, you got to be the best 7 out of 10 player that you are. You can't try to be a 10 out of 10er. So you've got to do what you do and do it well. And I wonder if the Riders got themselves a little bit out of sync in doing that.
Because of the injuries, like you said, you got your second, third safety in there. Obviously, we knew what was going on in the corners. And then I'll ask you, when Rivas went down, to me, that That's a big loss. Like Roland Milligan, it all works in combination back there. Milligan is as good as he is because there's a lot of guys around him doing, like you had said, their jobs when they need to. The Rivas thing kind of has me worried.
CJ Rivas is probably the unsung hero on the defense. I think we had this discussion before. Someone asked me, who would you say is the unsung player on the Rough Riders? And CJ Rivas, for what he does and the physicality that he brings, the multifaceted and multidimensional approach that he brings, right? He can cover if he needs to in the pass game. He's not afraid to get up there, stick his nose in and get dirty in the run game. He definitely can blitz. He is a very, very intelligent player that is just hitting his stride right now. And he's talked about the fact that he's inspired by Roland Milligan Jr. and what he sees from him across the way. So although they don't get to play together because they're on opposite sides of the defense, CJ Rivas is really one of those guys that's a key cog in the defense. And yeah, it was tough to see him get shaken up in that last game against Montreal.
I hope he's back. It's funny, you don't notice some guys until they're not there, but for the most part, it's been especially that the front and those linebackers, like obviously the secondary, we know there's been some moving parts in there because of safety in that, and we get back from the bye, and then with Edmonton, outside of Jalen Philpott having a great game, did you think that Jason Moss called an incredibly smart game for whatever the Riders were doing in the first half? And Barney had asked about halftime adjustments, if there were. It looks like Moss adjusted right with them. He seemed to be a step ahead from kickoff.
I can't say enough good things from what I saw from Jason Moss in that football game. And let's look at Jason Moss and his evolution as a coach, right? So start with the head coach job in Edmonton. And remember, he's throwing around headsets and telephones and slamming things and stomping his feet. And
nice.
That's what the players in Edmonton read and felt. And you could see that emotion level rise with them. And that led to a lot of bad things on the football field. This time around in Montreal, again, Coach Moss has got all kinds of talent, right? Like, you cannot dispute the amount of intelligence this man has. And yes, things have gone awry in Montreal this year, primarily because they haven't had a quarterback. As Davis Alexander, their starting quarterback, has been out much of the year. Their backup in McLeod Bethel-Thompson up until last week was ineffective. And then Caleb Evans is gone for the year. So you're down to guys from the front row in the stands. But you have to give him credit for his remarkable patience and trying to keep the team calm. And I think he learned that along the way to winning a Grey Cup, which the Montreal Alouettes did out of nowhere. And Luke talked about this in the broadcast in the last game. And boy, I keep quoting Luke. He's going to get half my fee for this. But anyways, one thing that he pointed out.
You're getting paid? What? Hold on a sec. I'm just here for the IT videos. Oh, come on, man.
Or making it rain, my friend. But getting back to that thought, when it comes to Jason Moss, is that Jason Moss right now is selling his dressing room that we know what the formula is. We know the recipe and what it looks like to win a Grey Cup, and you need to get hot and peak at the end. He's got quarterbacks getting healthy. He's got receivers getting healthy. He's got defensive group that is starting to look more like what I think he envisioned. And he's selling right now, hey, we're going to get hot and we're going to roll this thing to the Grey Cup. And I think that his dressing room is buying in more than ever before.
Not a ton of moves by the Riders in the off week. They signed defensive back Sheldrick Redwine. That was on Monday. Yesterday, they signed their global punter. Is there a story to this? Are we not happy with Joe Couch? Is just we drafted him, get him signed. What are we reading into as Rider Nation? And we read into everything.
Oh my gosh, do we ever? I've heard everything from he's a new holder to he's going to go ahead and replace the Australian accent in the dressing room. It's like, oh my gosh, like literally someone talked about the accent with me this week.
Dave, we don't do well with time on our hands. Okay, bye weeks don't go well for Rider fans, especially when we lose. We don't know what to do with ourselves.
To try to read between the lines of the signing is difficult because now we have 3 punters on our roster, right? With James Wright, Joe Couch, and the new guy. So I don't know how this is going to factor in, but again, I do know that the football operations department are always looking for ways to make the team better. And if they think that they found a way, whether it's that signing, again, you look at any of the players that have been brought in, it's always to make the team better, and that's what this signing is going to do. We'll see whether or not punter is on the field on Tuesday here in Regina when the team goes back to work.
Could you imagine Kent Majeri if he's dreamed up a play where all three of them got on the roster and then all three of them ended up on the field? I would love to see, because that would be like a first in Canadian football. The triple punter blank to be like the Riders, 3 punters and a Grey Cup championship in 2025. Talking about the games tonight, it's underway. No score first quarter. Argos are driving. It's funny. I'm talking about McLeod Bethel Thompson. The Argonauts sacked him, and then the Argos are on the move here with Jared Dagey. Do you think that Ryan Dinwiddie he's a good enough coach because he's had to do plug and play so much in the past 3 years because his roster gets raided, they have injuries, that he can get guys ready to play that maybe aren't ready for prime time because of who he is as a guy leading that football club?
I know there's an immense amount of respect around the Canadian Football League for Ryan Dinwiddie, and not only does he lose players from his roster, he loses very talented coaches, one of which, of course, resides here with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and that's no easy task once you get that chemistry. And that's the big word, I think, right now in coaching staffs, is you have to have chemistry and alignment with what your vision is. And the double defensive coordinator position in Toronto makes me scratch my head a little bit because I'm not sure who's calling the shots. Somebody is, but it seems to be working. And I know with the injuries, and you could sense the frustration at the conclusion of the game last week with the Argonauts when Dinwiddie went running down the sideline, hopping and kicking in front of the
I love that. That was awesome.
A show of emotion. Yeah, absolutely. And his team's fired up. And again, he knows how to win. And like I say, the amount of respect that I hear for him from others across the Canadian Football League leads you to believe that your conclusion is right when it comes down to him knowing his stuff, knowing how to get the most out of his athletes and put them in the right spots at the right time.
I was having this conversation with a couple of one more nutso Rider fan than me, and then someone who's a casual. And I'm like, this is great. The Riders, if successful season, how this plays out, obviously we want them to win a Grey Cup. But I'm like, careful, because look what happens. Success, everybody wants a piece. Players, coaches, all of that. Everyone is going to pick away like they do, like we've seen with the Argos and the Bombers, that the Riders could have that bullseye on their back if they end up winning the Grey Cup this year. A lot of talented coaches went into putting together the plan to do it. The players were able to execute on the field. That makes them attractive to a lot of other people. This is what success will bring. And I don't know if people have thought about that. Because if they're not under contract, they only play for a short amount of time. They got as much as they can when it's being offered, and that's a problem that I don't think we've really had to worry about very much in these past years.
We had 8 all-CFL players on our roster last year, and Jeremy O'Day was able to bring them all back. So sure. I think we've already started to encounter that situation, but yes, you're right. These players are showing what they can do, and I'm all for, getting paid, right? So it's interesting. And again, that's not our job. It's not my job, thankfully, right? If you saw my fantasy football team, you'd understand why me being a GM of anything is a bad idea. But I'll tell you, it's going to be, that's what success breeds, right? Success breeds opportunity.
I don't know what to make of this Stampeder game tonight, because Vernon Adams Jr. has not looked like VA earlier in the season. I found that ever since they won that game in Calgary, there's been a huge drop-off. And he's been, okay. BC seems to have their offense going. It's their defense that causes them problems. What do you think tonight in Calgary? Because that's a big game.
Definitely is a big game. I think it's a bigger game for the BC Lions. The Calgary Stampeders would love to keep pace with the Saskatchewan Roughriders and, of course, use the game in hand to their advantage. So it's a big one for the Stampeders. But I'm really curious because Vernon Adams Jr. really has downplayed the whole I'm going up against the team that traded me away. He's really downplayed that aspect. And I guess you would expect nothing less from a professional quarterback, right? Saying that it's all about, the win this week and that's what our focus is and everything like that. But if you're the BC Lions, man, you've been inching and getting closer to Winnipeg, and Winnipeg plays Ottawa tomorrow. I got to be a little bit scary. And with that defense, they can be so hot and cold, and it's not just game to game or week to week. It seems to be series to series sometimes. And that one's a head scratcher. Mike Benavides is an excellent coach. And I don't know why all of a sudden people don't think that he is. I get it. It's a results-based business, but come on now. Mike Benavides has been one of the top defensive minds in Canadian football for an awful long time. It's just whether he's not getting buy-in from his group, whether it's the assignments that are being misunderstood, I don't know what the answer is. But when I see that game, to answer your question and finally return to what I see happening with Calgary and BC, I see Calgary coming out, and if they can run the ball, and when they're running the football with Dietrich Mills, they're successful. And if they can establish that early and continue to do it throughout the course of the game, that presence is a big, big factor. And I'm going to be curious to see whether or not the front four or front seven or however many Benavides is going to put in the box, whether or not they can stop him.
And for all the Lions fans that are calling for Benavides jobs with the coaching cap, you're stuck with him. You can't fire coaches because you got to pay him. You only get so much money, and until that's off the books. So you got to figure out how that works. Darian said the defense is very complicated. You need to be a veteran, and they just have too many young guys that just don't understand it yet. That doesn't make you feel any better, but if that's one of the reasons why there's been so many busts from time to time. Tomorrow, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Chris Streveler go into Ottawa. They're going to take on Drew Brown and the Red Blacks. To me, Dustin Crum is Rodney Dangerfield. He comes in and he does what he's asked. I think he plays well, but he gets no respect. Farhan Lalji just made a point an hour ago. Does Drew Brown give you more than Dustin Crum with what we've seen out of him plays? Because you're getting a 100% effort. Guys all out, running, throwing. Drew Brown's been inconsistent at times and hurt at others. But he'll get the start.
I would lean towards the hurt part more than the inconsistent part. But what I think that Drew Brown brings that Dustin Crum doesn't is confidence. I think the team absolutely believes in Drew Brown. I think Eugene Lewis, when he was deciding that he was going to sign with the Ottawa Red Blacks, knew in his mind that he was going to be having footballs thrown to him by Drew Brown, not Dustin Crum. And I think with Brown back in the huddle, Brown back commanding that offense, the confidence rises, and I think that that's gigantic.
I remember that conversation that Barty had with Gino Lewis, and there was talk with the Riders or whatever. So you're telling me that you would have much rather had footballs thrown to you from Drew Brown than a Trevor Harris? Trevor Harris, who's got tens of thousands of yards thrown and touchdowns and completions. Oh, Gino. Come on, Gino. Really?
No. I'm just saying that if the dollars were on the table, right?
Okay.
And athletes aren't dummies. They know the situation that they're signing into, where they're going to fall in on the depth chart, so on and so forth. And I'm sure that if Ottawa approached him with the same dollars and said, yeah, Dustin Crum is going to be our starter on day number one, he might have had a different consideration than what he would have had with Drew Brown. Again, Drew Brown has shown in spurts that he commands the offense, understands the defense, and can make receivers good. Because if you don't have a good quarterback, your receivers aren't that good either.
I wonder if in that Bomber dressing room, because you see the frustration on a Nick Dembski's face, you see it on a Brady Oliveira's face. Willie Jefferson wears a shaded eye mask, so I can't tell his facial expression. But I wonder if they're at the point where these guys say, all right, enough is enough. We're doing this by committee. We're getting this done. Stravy, you do what you do, and we're all in. Like, they got to take this over because there is no Zach Caleros back there helping them out, where this is kind of got to be because there are times when they have run that run package with Streveler and looked very creative in a run first pass option. So for anybody, I think that is just giving the Red Blacks the automatic W tomorrow, I think the Bombers, maybe pride's going to play into this because maybe they've had enough. Because if you look at Brady Oliveira's face last game, he don't look like a happy football player.
I would suggest pride, experience, and savvy will be the three keys for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They've been there, they've done that, and now it's going to be on the coach to see whether or not, and I'm not just talking Mike O'Shea, I'm talking about the new offensive coordinator, even Jordan Younger, who I've got all the respect for too, right? Jordan Younger, you talked to Trevor Harris about him. The two of them were teammates at one point, but Trevor Harris says Jordan Younger is an amazing defensive mind, but you've got to go ahead with all the injuries that Winnipeg, has, both sides of the ball, right? You've got to go ahead and you have to get the most out of your athletes, whomever the athletes are that are on the field. And right now, I think that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are struggling a little bit in finding that sweet spot with Chris Streveler, right? We know he can run the run-pass option, but we also know that he can throw the football if it's in a certain situation. So I'm going to be very curious. That's what I'm watching. But again, I'm not counting Winnipeg out. I'm not counting BC out. Maybe I'm counting Edmonton out. But that's just a maybe. Just
whoa. Because Edmonton is the one team that scares me because we go there next after the bye. Mm-hmm. And Edmonton's playing decent football, run game, return game. Cody's just doing enough Cody to get them by. Like say, he's a gamer. He'll scrap. He'll fight. They'll doing it. And the other thing too, Dave, they got nothing to lose. They got to lay it all out on the line. And to them, they're already playing playoff football. That's what worries me is their carefree attitude of, all right, we got nothing else.
Well, similar to the BC Lions, though, I'm not counting out their talent. I'm not saying anything about the football team. What I'm telling you is the numbers, right? Look at the season series and where they're at. Now, of course, they have split with Calgary, right? They did that split over the Labor Day weekend. So, okay, that looks a little bit better. But BC, for example, right? BC has already lost the season series to Winnipeg and Calgary. And again, Edmonton is starting to fall into that trap with where the season series are at and how things are going to go. They dug them a deep hole. I give them full credit for coming out of it and not giving up. But can you get out of that hole? Because you got to pass a lot of teams in the West, and the Eastern crossover isn't looking as cinched up as I would suggest that it was even 2 weeks ago.
There probably won't be an Ed Hervey mea culpa anytime soon for how this thing started. All right, before we go, it's Friday. There's a lot going on. We'd like to maybe just go off the rails a little bit. Who do we have to give a birthday shout out to here? What's going on? I know you've got obligations.
No. We got a great Rider fan that is celebrating a birthday, and because we're on a bye week, can't put the message up on the Maxtron. So up in Saskatoon, Annette Stesick. Oh, here we go. I'm not going to sing, though. Curtis, could we have picked the slower version of Happy Birthday?
Yeah,
Annette?
Curtis. Curtis.
Wow. Anyways.
Now. Oh, don't group text. I will group text you to be like, this is a bad choice for happy birthday.
Annette Stesick up in Saskatoon getting set to cheer on the team in green tonight at the homecoming game at Griffith Stadium because she's got a running backs coach to watch. So Annette is celebrating a birthday. Have a very happy birthday. Hopefully you get some downtime. I know you're helping with your daughter Amanda and her 1-month-old. So a fun time for Annette up in the Bridge City. So Annette, have a very, very happy birthday today.
It's one thing to get a birthday shout out on the radio. It's another thing to get a birthday shout out on the radio from the voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, Dave Thomas. Real quick. Nothing Monday. Team is back on the practice field Tuesday.
Yeah, team will return to work on Tuesday, head to Edmonton on Friday, and then we play the Elks next Saturday.
Ooh. Thank you very much, Dave Thomas, voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Have a great weekend.